Hi everyone, welcome to E-Content Development Center, Majlis Arts and Science College, Paramanur. I am Abdul Karim from the Department of English. In this short video, I am going to talk to you about Transformational Generative Grammar or TG grammar as it is known. By watching this video, you will be able to understand the different stages of the development of grammar and the difference between structuralist approach and generative approach to grammar. First of all, let me ask you, what is grammar? Grammar is a word that brings a lot of confusion to our mind. Etymologically, the term grammar goes back to Greek word grammatike, which may be translated as the art of letters. Grammar has been approached and defined differently by different scholars and schools of linguistics. Actually, it is very difficult to precisely define the term grammar. Grammar is an attempt to discover patterns in language structure, an attempt to classify words and sentences, and to deduce certain rules. A study of grammar includes the 5 fundamental units of grammatical structure, such as morpheme, word, phrase, clause, and sentence. There are different approaches to grammar: traditional approach, structuralist approach, generative approach, etc. Traditional grammar is prescriptive in nature. That means prescribing certain rules of do's and don'ts as to how one should speak or write in conformity with the standards of Latin grammar, as it was believed Latin is superior to all other languages and has the perfect grammar. Hence, all languages should conform to it. They believed written language is superior to spoken form. No importance was given to spoken varieties of the language. But actually, grammar, being a scientific study, should be descriptive, not prescriptive. Linguistics attained the status of science only by 20th century. The beginning of 20th century was marked by a new approach to grammar. 4 major schools of thought are officially acknowledged in linguistics, namely structural linguistics, generative linguistics, functionalist linguistics, cognitivist linguistics. The new approach to grammar, structuralist linguistics, suggested by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, who published Course in General Linguistics in 1916, American linguist Leonard Bloomfield, Introduction to the Study of Language in 1914, etc., ushered in a revolution in understanding the structure of language. It aroused a reaction against the approach of traditional grammarians of the earlier centuries. Structuralist grammar is descriptive nature. The structural linguistics began to study language in terms of observable and verifiable data and describe it. They attempted to describe language in terms of its structure as it was being used. They emphasized speech is primary, writing is only secondary. They tried to look for regularities, patterns, and rules in language structure. In order to study the structure of a sentence, the structural linguists thought of dividing a sentence into immediate constituents, that means ICs. This is called immediate constituent analysis or IC analysis. The principle involved was that of cutting a sentence into 2, further cutting these parts into another 2, then continuing the segmentation till the smallest unit, the morpheme, was arrived at. Immediate constituent analysis or IC analysis is a structuralist tool to study a sentence. Phrase structure grammar or PSG is another model used by structuralist grammarians. There were a lot of limitations and inadequacies with these models. TG grammar has its first exponent in Noam Chomsky, a very famous American linguist. Chomsky was born on the 7th of December 1928 in Philadelphia. His ideas about the structure of language transformed the field of linguistics and laid the groundwork for the discipline of generative linguistics. In his 2 seminal works, Syntactic Structure, published in 1957, and Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, came out in 1965, Chomsky tried to answer several questions left unanswered by the structuralist grammar. So before we moving to the TG grammar, let us check the inadequacies of structural grammar. Structuralist grammar is primarily corpus bound. Corpus means a body or a mass of work or data. That is, there will be a given data. Structuralist grammar analyzes a given data by inductive method. They already have a formula or theory in mind, and by using this formula, this data is analyzed. Chomsky, on the other hand, takes another approach, a deductive approach, in building a theoretical account of grammar. What he does is, he doesn't use the theory or formula at first. All he has is the data, and by analyzing the data, he tries to arrive at the formula or theory. His grammar tries to attempt how the competence of a native speaker of a language can enable that speaker to generate or to produce an infinite number of grammatical and meaningful sentences from a finite set. While structuralism took into account the form rather than the meaning, TG grammar considers the relation between form and the meaning as crucial in generating the sentences that are both grammatical and meaningful. Chomsky gives an interesting example of a sentence. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. The sentence is grammatical, but meaningless. It shows that it is possible for a sentence to be both grammatical and meaningless. Now let us move on to the generative grammar. What is a generative grammar? The idea of a generative grammar was first definitely articulated by Chomsky in 1957. Generative grammar is a grammar or set of rules that indicate the structure and interpretation of sentences which native speakers of a language accept. Generative grammar is a linguistic theory which describes a set of rules to use sequence of words properly to form grammatical sentences. Transformational grammar is looked upon as one of the approach to generative grammar, which describes a language with the help of transformational rules. It involves logical reasoning. As such, transformational grammar goes a step ahead of structural grammar, focusing more on the sentence structure used for communication. TG grammar allows us to generate an infinite number of sentences from finite set of rules through transformations. As the name suggests, transformational generative grammar has two aspects, generative component and transformational component. Generative aspect predicts what could be possible sentences of language. Transformational aspect is a kind of process that transforms one sentence into another. It uses finite number of rules to produce infinite number of sentences. TG grammar attempts to bring out the way in which any particular piece of language is created by the intrinsic knowledge of competence that underlies the actual performance. Competence and performance, deep structure and surface structure are the new concepts put forward by Chomsky. Linguistic competence is the subconscious ability to create and understand sentences, including those that are completely new. It is the speaker's or hearer's knowledge that allows people to construct and understand grammatical sentences. And linguistic performance is the concrete linguistic output. It is the actual use of language in the real context. Now, transformational component. It has transformational rules which charge the deep structure component into surface structure. Look at these sentences. She is not a student. Is she a student? You may think these are different sentences, but they are only different forms of the same underlying structure of the sentence, she is a student. She is a student is the underlying structure. That is the deep structure of the sentence, is she a student, which is the surface structure. Deep structure is a kernel sentence, simple, declarative, assertive and active sentence. Deep structure determines the meaning of the sentence, whereas surface structure determines the sound. Finally, let us see what are the merits of TG grammar. Ambiguity in meaning was a major problem with IC analysis and phrase structure grammar. TG grammar helps in solving ambiguity by examining the deep structure of a sentence. For example, look at the sentence, flying plane is dangerous. What is the meaning of this sentence? Is there any ambiguity? The one meaning is flying plane is dangerous. That means the plane that flies is dangerous. Here the deep structure of the sentence is the plane is flying, it is dangerous. And in the second meaning, flying plane is dangerous means the act of flying a plane is dangerous. Here the deep structure is somebody is flying the plane. So the act of flying is dangerous. So you can see there are two different deep structures for the surface structure flying plane is dangerous. I hope now you got a basic idea about TG grammar and how it differs from other grammars. With this, let me conclude this session. Thank you.